Welcome to Diagnosing Dx, the podcast giving diagnostics the platform it deserves. While therapeutics and devices often take centre stage, diagnostics is the engine driving precision medicine. I'm your host, David Philby, and each week we spotlight the innovators, breakthroughs, and real-world challenges shaping the future of DX. In this exclusive episode of Diagnosing DX, I'm joined by Fred Sweeney, CEO of VedaBio. Fred reveals the breakthrough that could reshape point-of-care diagnostics, detecting DNA and RNA without amplification while maintaining full clinical sensitivity in 10 minutes. We discuss the unmet need in urgent care, the disciplined approach VedaBio is taking to de-risk development, and the culture required to thrive in diagnostics. If you want a front row seat to the future of decentralised testing, this is the episode to listen to. Welcome to the show, Fred. Thank you for coming on this week.
David, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, 100%. I'm really excited, actually. I'm really excited. We've got a lot to cover. I've been really looking forward to this one because I think there's stuff here that we're going to be able to talk about, which is just super exciting. And I know there's a lot of information and intrigue in what you guys are doing at VedaBio, and being able to bring some of that to light is just is a great opportunity. So before we do that, really important that we find out who you are and your background. If you'd like to introduce yourself and who you are, that would be great.
Of course. Well, my name is Fred Sweeney, as you can see at the bottom left of the screen here. I'm the president and CEO of VedaBio, big champion of diagnostics. I've been in the world of diagnostic for the most part of my career. I would say, most on the smaller company side. This is my fifth startup, actually, that I've been involved at different levels of seniority. And dabble a little bit in venture capital as well, with a fund called Versant Ventures, where I was on the operational side, entrepreneur in residence, and also OMX Ventures, which is a very big supporter of VedaBio as well. And then actually probably most relevant, and one of my best experience also was part of the corporate development team at bioMérieux, the large infectious disease company, where I think as we talk today, lots of dots are going to connect between bioMérieux, BioFire, VedaBio, and even some of the team that you even had on your podcast very recently. It's big shoes to fill, actually, to come 100%. To come after Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel's I think went viral. But as I think I said this to you before, but Rachel cheated in a way. If you're telling a historic story, I feel like you're always going to get a really big audience.
She cheated, but she has a contagious personality. So, 100%. So basically, been in the world of small startups, being involved in kind of formalizing the corporate venture fund at bioMérieux as well, which is an amazing experience, which is going strong still today. So, a little bit of everything from all different angles. Then you end up being an expert in nothing. But yeah, I've seen it from all the angles. And then maybe the last thing I'll say, is from a technical background. Actually, it's interesting because I did my graduate degree at the University of Toronto. I did a PhD in DNA repair and homologous recombination, and I mean, it was 20 years ago. But now, I've always been a kind of a CRISPR geek by trade, right? So I'd been keeping a pulse on this ever evolving, amazing technology that went into a million different ways. And so I know just enough to ask the annoying questions internally, certainly not enough to be the expert in the R&D side of things. We have some great people for that. But the technical side of things, for once in the last 20 years, is really helpful.
Yeah, 100%. So originally your PhD on that side as well, right? So very technical. How did you enter the industry? What were the sort of first 10 years of what you did, and how quickly did you pivot away from maybe sort of the scientific work?
Yeah, oh man, that's always a story that's easier to connect the dots going backwards, right? It was more of it was opportunistic. A lot of my confidence far exceeded my capabilities, and my ambition had the best of me on a lot of these things. But yeah, like in the late 2000, especially in the Toronto area, there was a bit of a resurgence of startups, and I had an extremely supportive who's still one of my best friend today, PhD supervisor, who kind of allowed me towards the end of my PhD to explore other things, which at the time was a bit frowned upon, right? So you either go to academia or you go to industry.
Mm.
And yeah, I was fortunate enough. I started volunteering in a small boutique investment bank as I was still doing my PhD,
Oh, right.
and and um, that kind of gave me uh, a little bit the taste of what it was to. So I was helping with scientific diligence for angel groups who want to invest in startups and things, and that kind of gave me a taste a little bit of the startup life sciences world, and frankly also a little bit to develop a network of folks that once it was time to find a real job after, well, not really after, just as I was graduating, I was very fortunate to work with a venture fund at the time. It doesn't exist anymore, called Vengrowth, up in Canada, which very hard jobs to find. But because I had this kind of like, I don't know, like this a little bit like neuronal plasticity of knowing how the world works on the investment side at a younger age. I think it gave me a bit of an edge to get the job, and that's how I really pivoted really quickly after graduate school. So
So those two things have been pretty consistent through your career then, in that you've been able to stay close to the diagnostic world, but also perform and operate on the corporate strategy and funding and investment side of the industry.
yeah, it's again super fortunate, right? So it's more a question of good fortune than planning, to be honest with you,
Mm.
especially when you're like in your mid-20s and you want to take over the world. But yeah, very fortunate. But I think also looking back, in the world we live in, and the kind of call it the company creation, company formation, company growth at this early stage, I still believe it's very important to have a foot in both sides of the equation, right? You don't want to have the ambition to take over the R&D, because I think that's a mistake that a lot of young founders, CEOs would do, is to just run R&D. But having a foot on both sides, really truly understand what it takes to build a company, how hard it is to build a company beyond the tech, right? The operations, the fundraising, the culture of the company, etc. I think that gives you a bit of a nice kind of melting pot of experiences that maximizes the chances of success down the road.
Yeah. And you mentioned, this is your fifth startup. Is this
Hmm.
the first one as CEO?
Yes, it's the first one as CEO. Most of them were, if actually all of them, were on the corporate development side, right?
Mm.
So, how do you raise money? How do you in-license stuff? How do you out-license stuff? So really on the transactional side. But again, because the companies were all early stage ish, right? Until, some of them went through FDA, some of them went to IPO, some of them went to M&As. But at the time we're early stage, the science is still quite important in the equation.
Yeah, interesting. So, CEO now of VedaBio.
Yeah.
Who are VedaBio?
So VedaBio is a company that I had quit my current day job to join VedaBio because I was so excited. I'll tell you a little bit about the genesis of Veda, right? The genesis of Veda was a company that was created out of University of Urbana-Champaign and in Illinois, University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Great university, great technology, great smart people. Like I think over dozens of Nobel Prizes come from there. But it was scouted and identified by a group of investors called OMX Ventures. OMX Ventures and the team over there, I had known for many, many, many years. And I think that's one of the current theme that is going to come out of this is also like it's kind of like the network that you build and kind of like the people you meet along the way, even if it's like 10 years ago and now you start working with them again. I think that creates a certain richness and that's really hard to quantify, but it's very important. So VedaBio was identified, scouted by a group called OMX Ventures, who would Craig Asher, who was the founding partner over there, give me a call to do some diligence on the company, and we got really really excited about it. And I don't know how long I can give you a story, but I can talk for a long time about the creation of VedaBio. But at the core of what VedaBio does, right? And then I can kind of tell you a little bit more like the product focus vision that we have, because we're a very product focused company. If there's one thing to remember about VedaBio is, to my knowledge, right? And I've been stewing in that world for a long time, but to my knowledge, and the reason we got so excited is it was the first platform company in molecular diagnostics that promised at the time, right? Because it was an idea on a napkin, really, that promised to detect molecules of DNA and RNA, which is what molecular diagnostics do, at clinically relevant sensitivities, which is very important, right?
Hmm.
But without the need to amplify the target originally, right? And there's a signal amplification in what we do, obviously, to meet that sensitivity. But the reason this is so important, right? And this is, if there's one thing to remember, that's what we do. That we have a platform that detect molecules of DNA and RNA without the need for target amplification, which is able to meet clinical relevance. But the reason this is so important, and that's kind of comes back to a little bit the credo or the high level mission, if you like, of VedaBio, is if you think in molecular diagnostic, you have so much good high medical value in hospitals today. You know, whether you think about oncology or infectious disease, or there's such a richness of high medical value, but the platforms behind it are great for the setting, right? For the hospital setting. But if you want to decentralize this, meaning like put it in the hands of folks who don't have access to it, you know, urgent cares, when it matters, right? For the application that matters, you
Yeah.
kind of get into like this game of compromise where it's really hard to meet the requirement of point of care, right? Because point of care, they want it all. They want it fast, cheap, easy. And if you're not willing to compromise on medical value, which is our core fundamental principle, right? It gets very complicated because there's an amplification in there. So technically speaking, you have all these things like primers and probes and amplicons and instruments that are more complex. So if you remove that need for target amplification, now all of a sudden, for the very first time, you can allow yourself to fantasize really about, hey, what if we take that high medical value and we can put it in the form factor that's really fit for purpose in the decentralized setting? So to answer your original question, VedaBio was really created on that fundamental idea that if we remove the need for target amplification for molecular diagnostic application, where it really matters, because again, that's very important to have fit for purpose, you know, commercial strategy. If you remove the need for target amplification, then also then for the very first time, we can start thinking about bringing high medical value to the decentralized setting, and that's what we got really, really excited about here.
Did you, when you were first asked to do due diligence on the IP or the licensing
Yeah.
deal initially, did you immediately sort of relate to it and go, oh wow, this is so close to what I've been working my whole career towards?
Yes, and I'll tell you a bit of a story, right, about that, and it's actually quite convenient that you had Rachel on the podcast a little earlier, because she told an amazing story, which is the BioFire story.
Yeah.
It's like a fairy tale in the diagnostics. But when I was at bioMérieux, I had joined after the acquisition of BioFire, so I had nothing to do with the success of the company. But like I like to say, I was kind of like sitting front seat in that spectacle, right? Which was at this rocket ship of a company that was growing, and they were doing so well in the hospital setting. The film array is an incredible machine. It was fit for purpose for the hospital. They had thought about everything from the reimbursement, medical value proposition, did some really smart market access. And we were seeing that rocket ship of a company. And really, the goal, if you think about it strategically, is like, well, the problems in the decentralized setting are more, the acuity is less, but the problems are the same, right? I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'm in the urgent care all the time, right? With flu and cough and things. And I don't want to wait an hour, be $200 out of pocket to be told to go home and have some rest. And it was very underwhelming. So the unmet need of syndromic testing, right? Which I'm sure your audience by this time know what syndromic testing is, but one sample, like one nasal swab, for instance, for respiratory, and most of all the answers that you care to know about to have an action, medically speaking, that need is very, very strong in urgent care, but the requirements are very, very different, right? So they want it faster, cheaper, you know, and without compromising for the medical value. So it was always in the back of our minds to see how can we build a fit for purpose, and that's very important, right? A fit for purpose instrument and test that would just basically slide into the urgent care workflows, work with the reimbursement, and could we give that syndromic approach? So at the end of the day, it was really difficult to do. And one of the reasons it was so difficult, it was because there's an amplification in pretty much every single diagnostics test out there. So to answer your question about the minute that Craig called and we saw, again, it was an idea on a napkin at the time, right? Lots of promises, not a lot of data. But we start convincing ourselves with the data, and the data evolve over time. But yeah, I mean, right away, it was like this platform can potentially do many things. But this is the thing that if you go back in time 7 years, when we had bioMérieux, we would be looking for in terms of developing a fit for purpose instrument, syndromic instrument for the point of care. So we went right away from the tech, the platform, right into the product. Very focused on product.
I love that, because I think that, I'm not going to name drop anyone, but some of the most impressive and successful people I spoke to in the industry this year, what they all have in common is that they focus on the unmet need and work backwards to build successful diagnostics companies. They don't have scientific breakthrough and go, we should make this into a company. And so they know what they're trying to achieve from day one, and then work backwards and do everything they can to make that possible. And it comes across in this as well.
Yeah.
The removing the need for amplification. So what is the impact of that on patients in the urgent care setting, in decentralized settings? What do they experience differently from the VedaBio product?
Yeah. So in line with exactly what you said, like the patient, even the provider, doesn't have a clue what's going on in the box, right?
Right.
So again, we're so focused on the product, right, that we really from day one, literally from day one, right, we said this is what we want to build, right? This is what's going to fit. And then, and I'll answer your question in a minute. But the reason this is so important, because I think you made a very important point, right? The reason it is so important, in my opinion, to be so focused on the product is that this product that you want to build informs your really early R&D experiments, right? Even at the earliest stage of point of proof of concept, even in feasibility. Because if you miss the boat on your feasibility, you'll miss the product. And it's exactly what happens often is like you have this great platform that can do many different things, and then you platform your way out of money pretty quickly, right? So in terms of the patient, so what is the patient going to experience? The patient will experience, again, for the very first time, right, walking in, as my example, like if I walk in the urgent care with Elliot or Sienna, for instance, with respiratory infections, right? Because respiratory is 80% of the market. It's a huge. There's 124 million people walking into an urgent care today in the U.S. alone every year with respiratory infections. So that's a huge market, right? So what happens, right? Today, as you walk in, as I'm sure you know, we all know, not just for kids.
I have two young kids as well, so yeah,
Well, yeah,
I'm there.
Exactly. So you're gonna walk in there. You're gonna, if you're lucky, you're gonna be seen within 45 minutes. Peak of flu season, there's a whack load of people waiting in line with masks and coughs and stuff. And if you're bringing your kid and you're not sick, you're pretty sure you're gonna come out of there sick.
Yeah, 100%.
So you get a 2-for-1.
Yeah.
But and then what's important is like how often do you walk out of there with a result in your hand, right? And that's important to remember that urgent care is a very kind of patient satisfaction centric environment where it's competitive, and these urgent care providers compete on patient satisfaction and return patients, etc. So what you want to do, and this is almost like how we started, right? Even before the tech, before the instrument, before any plastic or liquid, we said, how can we build something that would maximize patient experience in an urgent care, right? And what are the requirements for that? And we will not compromise on these requirements, right? Well, number one, the requirement is you want to have a result, right? So today, 20% of the time, give or take, depending on flu season or not, you'll walk out of there with a result. 80% of the
Mm.
time, you'll be told, well, you know what? There's something, we tested you for flu, COVID, RSV if you're lucky. There's nothing there. Something going around. I know there's something going around. Go home and call me if you don't feel better. Or even worse, here's the pink juice, the antibiotics, and go home and if they don't feel better tomorrow, have it. Well, that's absolutely irrelevant in more than 90 to 95% of the cases. So
Right.
that's what you experience today, right? So you're going to come out, you're going to wait, you're going to be $200 out of pocket. If you're insured, it's going to go right into your deductible. Like, I mean, it's not working, right? You'll be
Mm.
frustrated and you wasted half of your Saturday afternoon. So what the patient will experience with us, because we remove the need for amplification, right? All of a sudden, we can bring that medical value. So talk about a syndromic approach, right? Where 80+% of the time, right, you will get a result because we cover a lot of different pathogens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even the ones that are not treatable by a drug or an antibiotics, because again, for stewardship, whether it's antibiotics or even in urgent care, actually specifically steroid stewardship, right, is
Mm.
very, very important, right? So number one, 80% of the time you got a result. Well, it's important that that result, your practitioner talks to you about it, right? So you don't want to go home and get a result next day in your email. So that
Yeah.
then it's turnaround time, right? Turnaround time is another thing you can't compromise. Turnaround time needs to be in the 10 to 15 minutes, but most towards the 10-minute. Because why? Because it allows the practitioner to have an active conversation with our patients, right? So that's
Mm.
another thing on the turnaround time. There's two more things. The other thing is the cost of the test, right? We have to make sure that the test is to the practitioner, because our customer is the practitioner, the urgent care, fits within their economic. So there has to be um, a reimbursement and cost structure that makes sense. And then last but not least is the test has to be easy to run, right? Because at the end of the day, these tests are run by medical assistants, medical
Right.
technologists, and training folks on new ways of doing things is very difficult, right? And expensive. So the way we build a test is, if you're familiar with any kind of lateral flow workflow, like, I mean, I mentioned the Quidel Sophia a lot because that's the omnipresent test out there.
Mm.
Our workflow is exactly the same, right? So because we remove the need for targeted amplification in our platform, the patient will experience a result after waiting hopefully much less time, because the turnaround time is shorter, not being out of pocket, and then everybody wins. It's very important that the healthcare provider, the urgent care administration, and obviously us as a supplier benefit along the way. And that happens if the patient's happy.
Right. Now, you mentioned reimbursement there,
Mhm.
and obviously the product's been in development. Where are you guys now then? Where's the company? Where's the product? And sort of what miles? Because you've had some well publicized milestones, fairly recently as well in terms of
Yeah.
partnerships and stuff. So
Yeah.
where are you guys?
So we are right in the midst of product development, right? So and there's again, it comes with experience a little bit. Um, one of the things I forgot to mention in my intro about VedaBio, which is probably the most important thing of all the stuff, is once we set up the company, right? One of the things we did is, which was probably the most fun part, is I called Rachel, right? And I called like most of the folks that we'd work with, we'd work together at BioFire, and we brought the team back together, right? So
Right.
obviously you can see on our website the leadership team, but it goes beyond just the leadership team, uh, down to sample prep, product development. So we have a tremendous amount of experience, which is very helpful. And one of the things that you've learned is that, and how do you de-risk your very expensive part of your journey, right? Which is the true kind of product development, alpha, beta stage. Because once you start flipping the switch on this, it's expensive, right? And we live in a finance, especially now in the financing environment, that every single cent, it matters. It always matters, but nowadays it
Yeah.
matters more. So
Yeah.
what we had done, actually, we did something a little bit different than other companies, is that we went really, really, really deep on what we call our feasibility, right? So which we're exiting now. So with feasibility, we can show that we meet the LOD for all of the toughest targets. We can show it that we do that end to end as we stick something in your nose and I get a result, right? On a prototype format. So the product development cycle for us was super front-end loaded on de-risking the entire story in a
Right.
way that once we flip the switch on product development, we have a very kind of narrow target on one we're going to submit to the FDA. And that's where we are right now. We're exiting that very thorough feasibility, and then we're entering into product development. We didn't want to kind of like slide to first base on feasibility, do something on the corner of a bench and say like, oh, we see a signal. Great. It's feasible. Let's move on and start spending millions and millions of dollars in building a prototype. Because that's actually, frankly, that's mistakes that a lot of other companies do as well.
So the commercial partnership with the Siemens Healthineers side, right? So that was announced fairly recently. What does that mean for the business at this point when you're just exiting feasibility?
Yeah, it's not a commercial partnership. I just want to be clear.
Sure.
So it's a very early stage partnership. Getting a strategic partner on board in our space, diagnostic, whatever the strategy is, right? And the strategic partner, if you pick the right partner, I think it's amazing, right? So
Mm.
it was very important for us knowing that we're a small company and we will grow, but again, we don't want to bite more than we can chew. If there's 124 million people in the US alone, imagine in the rest of the world, right? And the question is always, how can you capture more of that faster, right? So the agreement with the partnership we had with Siemens was part of a thorough kind of like, uh, first half of 2025 discussion with a lot of different partners, right? And Siemens and Veda made a lot of sense for many, many reasons, right? And again, I'm not saying anything that's non-public. Siemens does not have a molecular diagnostic franchise, right?
Mm.
There were some relationships there as well, so there was an established trust already amongst the champions of that deal, and it's an exploratory partnership, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's too early, both for us and for them, frankly, to make a large commitment because we don't want to be, frankly, for us, we don't want to be tied up with a partner like from a shareholder value perspective, because we have some really good investors who put some money in and are expecting a pretty large return, right? So we didn't want to tie ourselves up in terms of our options in the future, but at the same time, we wanted to have a partner that can help us along the way for certain things, right? And I think the deal we structured with Siemens frankly, it's perfect. It's perfect,
Right.
certainly perfect for us. And it's a really, really good position for them because they get to know us, right? And at the end of the day, I was doing the same when I was bioMérieux, right? If it ever leads to an acquisition, right, which is, this is not, we're building a company at VedaBio. This is our motto, right? But if I'm on the other side, right, what I want to know is, yeah, the tech, yeah, the IP, yes, all that stuff. But what about the team, right?
Mm.
When problems happen, A, are they upfront about it? B, are they addressing it properly? Because there's always newsflash. There's always problems when you develop a new technology, right? So I think that inherent knowledge and relationship that we'll get along the way is very valuable for them, and for us, we get to know a potential partner for the future, right? So it's not necessarily a committed commercial partnership. It's more like I would call it a get to know each other partnership.
That's awesome. You've mentioned the team a couple of times, right? And
Oh
and
yeah.
and it sounds like I don't think it's necessarily been fortunate, but you've dipped into your past with people that you've worked with and trusted, and you. I mean, how important is that to you when you're building a startup team that you bring in people that how good they are, what they're good at, and even their limitations, I suppose, and where you sort of need them to focus and where you need other people. Is that all very intentional so that you can sort of piece it all together and create I guess the sort of the focus in one element, also the humility, so that people go, well, I don't know how to do that bit, so I'm not going to try and do that bit, which is really important in, you know, startup environments.
It is, David, it is the most important thing. And
Yeah.
I'll give you a controversial statement here. Once VedaBio is successful and, you know, it's in the hands of the patients and we all move on to certain thing, I want to do the same thing with the same team. And I don't even care what we work on. You know what I mean? So I think what it's the genesis of success, right? If you work with a team, it's not nepotism. It's not like you hire your friends, right?
Right.
You hire folks that you've been through the highs and lows with, right? And you hire the people that call you on your BS, right?
Right.
Brings you
Right.
down when I'm always get super excited, right? And I get over my skis sometimes with my enthusiasm. And we have a culture here that we, in a kind of super funny way, we all kind of bring each other back down to earth, and we talk about the reality. And when there's problems, we raise our hand right away. And I think this model, right, once you find that magic, this is something that Rachel spoke about the culture of BioFire as well. We're not BioFire, right? We don't have the same culture. We have our own unique culture. But the going to bed at night, knowing that your team, everything they say when they're here is coming from a place of doing the best for the company, right?
Yeah.
Is the most, at least in where I'm sitting right now, and in my tenure as first time CEO, is the most anxiety reducing thing that can happen, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want to I cannot talk about how important the team is.
I think that's an awesome point, because ultimately a stressed CEO of a startup is not an effective one. And if you can build a team around you that allows you to, you know, remain calm and balanced when making decisions and so forth. But the almost more important thing, and people get this wrong, we speak to early stage founders all the time who have put together a team of their friends, people they like, and I need a chief scientific officer. I love that person. I've worked with them before, but actually don't see the need for disagreement, and don't see
Mm-hmm.
the need to be challenged
Mm-hmm.
and get that wildly wrong and think
Oh
they're
yeah.
getting it right, because they see how, them guys worked together before, they've done it before, they're doing the same as us. So no, they've picked people that will challenge them, that will get to the right answers, not just people they worked with that they liked. It's an incredibly important point.
It's an amazing point. I think there's two mistakes that people say. Oh, you know, we're bringing a team of people. So you bring your friends or people that just agrees with you and makes you feel good, right? Which is the polar opposite of what you want to do. Honestly, you want people who challenges you. You want to walk again. It's the old saying. You want to walk in the room and feel like the dumbest guy in the room, right? And I do that pretty well. Uh, I've done that pretty well now. Structure a team that makes me feel like the dumbest guy in the room all the time, which I love. But also, you make the polar opposite as you hire for what I like to call the press release or the picture on the website, right?
Mm.
Oh, this person is so accomplished and you know all that stuff. And some of the time, yeah, absolutely, right? But at the same time, it's like you can't forget the core principle that we all have to work together, right? And at the end of the day, your pedigree, you know, really doesn't matter as much as your experience and your will to succeed, right? Because we're in a world where you stare at Mount Everest and you have to climb up, right? So do you select for people who say, "Oh my God, that's a big hill," right? Or you select people to say, "Hold my beer, I'm going in," right?
Mm.
And you just really have to select for folks that think like that, because it's not a straight line. It's certainly not a straight line to the bank, as we say.
Yeah, 100%. So what happens next? What's on the horizon and going into 2026? Where will we see VedaBio going?
Yeah, well, 2026, I think, I know, I hope, and I know it's going to be a big year for us. We always say that every year, and they're big years for different reasons. I think 2025 was a year of massive advancement in terms of our platform, taking what was historically maybe a bit of a too complicated and it needed to be platform at this creation and significantly simplifying it,
Mm.
which, generated all that buzz and an excitement as well. So 2026 really is a year of execution, right? Execution on three things. Um, Always technical execution, right? Product development, getting to like really putting all of the prototype together, making sure that it works all the time, etc. Um, Scientific execution. I'm really hoping that you're going to start seeing some posters and abstracts and some of the cool stuff that we use the Cascade for, the Cascade and the single enzyme system for. Um, and then financial execution, right? We did raise some money. And again, it was a bit opportunistic because of the strategic partnership and stuff. But we are kind of going to go on and raise our Series B in the first half of the year, which will take us all the way to commercialization
Right.
because the Siemens stuff going on. So again, famous last words. I'll review this recording in 3 years from now to see how right I was. But yeah, this should be like our last round before FDA clearance for the first panel. And really early commercialization, and then obviously you set up your growth round after that. So it's a big year for us.
So do we expect to see the product live and testing and data coming through next year?
We expect FDA submission, full FDA
Okay.
submission in let's say in a couple of years from now, plus and minus 6 months. If David, if I knew exactly how to predict these things, I would probably be still sitting here, but I would be in a different financial position. But yeah, so full speed ahead. So, but I think what you kind of start seeing, and you're kind of seeing data. So we've been pretty thin on
Right.
talking about our data to the outside world for a couple of reasons. I think there's been. There's been some skepticism on CRISPR for diagnostic, right? That's the technology and the enzyme itself has tons of promise, but it's really how do you take it from the initial promise to the clinically relevant in a product format. So we really wanted to come out with some of our data without any question marks on whether this is doable or not,
Right.
right? So 2026 is the year where you're going to start seeing that stuff from us coming out.
That skepticism of this feels like almost like the second wave of CRISPR diagnostics in terms of there was a few companies that had loads of excitement,
Yeah.
loads of skepticism, and actually you ended up partnering with Mammoth as well, right?
Yeah.
So has that been helpful and having sort of access to what they've given you access to?
Yeah, tremendously helpful. I think the CRISPR. I've been being a CRISPR geek for many years. We've been following since the inception, since the start of that. And I think it's not CRISPR specific, frankly. I think it's technology specific. You can think about this from like back in the way of like microarrays to sequencing to.
Mm,
There's always a couple of waves, right? There's a wave where
yeah.
the platform is really exciting, right? You can make some same analogy for the internet and AI, right? So the platform comes out, like, and then the full, but the people dream about the potential, which is what you want, right? Because what happens now is you generate this wealth of investments and people trying different things, and there's an attrition, right? We've seen that even in the drug space for
Yeah.
biotech for CRISPR, right? There's an attrition, and then like there's a focus, right? There's a focus on application, and we're coming in at that stage, right? We're coming in from like we talked about this earlier, from the product backwards to how can we make this product work, right? And we can make this product work by using CRISPR. We had started originally with this concept called the CRISPR cascade, which is still a very strong R&D project that we have internally, but has a 2-enzyme system. But what the big breakthrough that we had in the last 18 months is we were able to simplify the assay significantly, right, using a single enzyme system. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because it makes the system much cheaper, much easier to develop, et cetera, et cetera. And in order to do so and to simplify that story even more, simple is always better. We've partnered with Mammoth to get some access to some of the really fundamental intellectual property around Jennifer's Doudna's discoveries, right? And it's just we all know each other. I mean, Janice over there is a dear friend. She's crazy smart. And then it's we always say, and again, maybe because I've been doing this my whole career on the corporate development side, a deal is not the press release, right? A deal is what you make out of it. So we have a great relationship with them. We're exploring other ways to work together. I think what you'll see with Veda as well is we're a very collaborative, partner-driven company, because I've seen partnership work really, really well when they're win-win, right?
Yeah.
And look, if we can get our product to the patient faster and cheaper and better by partnering, even if we have to give something away, I mean, everybody wins, right? So that's kind of like the genesis of in my opinion, the CRISPR is like there's been obviously a super excitement, a bit of an attrition, and then I think you will see the next generation of product focus CRISPR stuff. In diagnostics, it's us, at least for now. But I think we'll be first in line for a while.
Yeah. How do you see the road to reimbursement?
Yeah, I mean the reimbursement is something we start thinking about very, very early. And again, it's not our first rodeo here. If you take together, so we have a very clear reimbursement strategy, and we work with the best in the biz in terms of folks that think about that stuff. So this is something we'll keep for ourselves what our reimbursement strategy is for now. But for a company at our stage, I think the sophistication around reimbursement is actually quite good, quite impressive. And again, it has nothing to do with me. It's like the super smart people working next to me and having done that over and over again. The only thing I did is to bring these people together.
Well, you've probably hit the nail on the head, to be honest, with reimbursement. It's get the best people in the business to do it and do it as early as possible. So, that's the key.
I'll let you, another part of our strategy is don't try to change the system, try to fit in the system that already exists. Right. And that was that's philosophy, right, informed some of the early experiment that we did in feasibility, saying like, how can we kind of analyze our pathogens and how can we put them together, et cetera, that would make us fit within the reimbursement scheme that already exists. Look, again, there's still work to do, right? So we haven't talked to validate this whole strategy with all the way to all the payers and stuff, but this is not on that Series A company. I mean, you gotta take it one step at a time.
Yeah. How do you see your role as CEO sort of changing over the sort of the next few years? And do you think are you enjoying this bit now and going into, Series B year, or you think you'll enjoy it further down the line, or has it been more fun at the start? How does it affect you?
I mean, you said something earlier. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I didn't want you to leave with the thought that I'm not anxious and I'm not stressed, right? It's like it's the swan principle, right? You look calm on the outside, and underneath you're fighting for your life. But no, I mean, look, it's an interesting question. I'll have to think a little bit about that one. Since the beginning, even when I was in the venture capital stuff, it was always on there's always like an investment kind of track, and there's an operational track with like entrepreneur in residence, venture partners. I was always on the operational track for some reason, because I think again, building a team is an amazing challenge, and I use the word challenge, right, because it's not easy, right? And but if you do it well, you want to create this almost like this organic entity that kind of like just kind of goes on its own, right?
Yeah.
And that comes with the right people, the right experience, the right trust, the right psychological safety internally, where you can raise your hand and say something without being chewed up. And so that part I love, and I think that part is really important all across the stages, but certainly even more important at the Series A, B, C stage when the company is kind of growing. And there's going to be a point where, we're 22 people now, so we're still pretty small. But once you get to like 60 to 80 people, you stop remembering people's kids' names and things like so because you just can't and you can have
Yeah, of
like
course.
people here can if you walk in my office, we can spend an hour talking about anything, right? And
Mm.
it's cool. It's really fun. But once you're a company of 100, 200 people, like you just can't do that anymore. So I've never been CEO of a company that's this size. So we'll see. Although I must say that at the build stage, it's also really fun, right?
Yeah.
By fun, I mean like you have to. There's a great book. It's called "Embrace the Suck," right?
Right.
It's not always like we can talk internally about it, and I can talk about this for a long time because I love talking about that stuff. But being rewarding and being fun, you have to find a way to link because day to day, like it's hard work, and we're in the science space. Most of the things you try doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
But the the rewarding part of it is showing up every day and giving all you got and getting excited about the challenge, right? And it takes a certain type of personality, but I think that personality, that growth mindset needs to be all the way into, because now we're going to get FDA clearance and we're going to start setting up a commercial organization, right? This is something that Rachel talked a lot about, right? And the challenges and the reward and stuff. So anyways, as long as the board is happy with what I'm doing, I hope to be sticking around for a long time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's a lot of and even though you do have a PhD and a strong technical background, a lot of the scientific founders that come straight out of academia, suddenly they're a founder. I think they really struggle as the company grows and becomes a corporate machine, and they
Yeah.
obviously have to seek to be replaced.
Yeah.
And that's very normal. But with what you've done in your professional career, actually, as you grow, maybe leans more into what you've done on a work basis over the next 20 years. So actually you might find a different type of enjoyment, but a very natural evolution into the role of a CEO of a Series B company, which would be really
Oh yeah.
interesting.
I mean,
Um,
I've learned, honest David, I've learned so much in the last, 24 months, right? And can you look back as the way you think even like 12 months ago with everything you've gone through. So, but I think the one thing um, is that's if you can just put the ego aside and drive on humility and recognize where you need help, right?
mm,
And this is not just for my position, it's for everybody, right? Like, and you mentioned this a bit earlier, like knowing what your sweet spot is. And it's okay to want to stretch because we hire people here, or we love to, I don't know if that's going to sound controversial, but what we say here is, I never really want you to be 100% comfortable in your job,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We want to select for people who get excited about almost like saying, can I do this? I've never done this
yeah,
before, right? Or this is a stretch for me, but then you find the excitement in that. And that goes from the research associate that we hire all the way to my job, which is
yeah,
again, it's a continuous learning process. So no, you're
yeah.
absolutely right. I mean, there's an evolution along the way for sure.
Final question, Fred. You've been able to raise capital, and you'll raise again next year. Outlook on the objective sort of diagnostics market and the landscape going into 2026.
It's a tough world out there, my friend. It's I think what's interesting, especially like this week, right? It seems like there's a nice resurgence on the interest around precision medicine for diagnostics, right? We've saw, like, just as of yesterday, the
Yeah.
Abbott Exact and a lot, public commercial companies are doing quite well in
Yeah.
this space. I think and let me preface this by, there's always money for good companies, right?
Mm,
No matter what the market is. So I think that's an advantage for us, right? It creates a bit of a natural selection where the Me Too's are not getting funded anymore, right? So we're certainly not a Me Too, but you just have to work harder. Yeah, you have to write 5 times harder to raise the same amount of money, which is fine. It's my job, and I signed up for this, and I love it. But um, the outlook for the, call it, Series A, B, and C companies is difficult, right? It's not what it was 3-4 years ago, both on the institutional investor side, but also on the strategic side, right? So the
yeah.
strategics, really, which most of them have a mandate to look at early stage companies, look at across the board. But when this kind of attrition happens, now you got much more financial decision makers that have
Mm,
a say versus maybe R&D or strategic. And what I mean by that is the financial decision makers and the big strategics look at dollars and cents, and they say, oh, I can buy this assets and receivership for 20 cents on the dollar. It's a Me Too, it's a tag along, but it's either it's cleared or it's a product. So I think the appetite for earlier stage stuff is lower, right?
mm,
And that's one. And I think two, what I see in my experience is, and again, that's playing well for us, is you have a focus from platform potential to product, right? What are you building? Tell me exactly what you're building. Tell me when it's going to be ready. Tell me how much it's going to cost. Don't tell me about how you're going to change. Don't give me a TED talk about your platform, right? Just tell me which product you're going to build. And frankly, from VedaBio, as we talked about at the early, maybe to full circle to the beginning of our conversation, this was the idea from day one, right?
yeah.
The product profile that we have today has not changed since day one. It's refined as we learn more, like reimbursement, things like this. But the idea of providing medical value to the decentralized setting in the infectious disease space as a first step has been the genesis of the company.
Awesome. Fred, thank you so much. That insight's fantastic. Thank you, from someone who'd know better than most, at the forefront of where the industry is. This was awesome. I loved it. I loved learning about VedaBio, the technology, the unmet need, and the company plans. I also love the not cautious. Cautious is the wrong word, but the thorough, disciplined approach in feasibility to build what you want to build before you rush to take it to market and so forth. I think it's really quite profound. But honestly, Fred, thank you so much for coming on and sharing the story with us.
David, it was an absolute pleasure. Love talking about what we do. Love talking about the industry. I haven't had a taste of the BioFire rocket ship. Being a spectator, I'm a huge believer in the power of diagnostics, and also the fact that you can build $1 billion business in our space.
There we go.
Thanks, David.